Welcome, friend. Tonight we will walk a quiet path together, you and I. There is nowhere you need to be, nothing you need to accomplish. The day has ended and the night has arrived to hold you. Let yourself settle into this moment, just as you are. Notice the weight of your body resting against the surface beneath you. Feel the gentle rise and fall of your breath, moving without effort. The air enters and the air leaves, like waves touching shore. You do not need to change anything about this breath. It has carried you through every moment of your life thus far, and tonight it will carry you into rest. Somewhere in the distance, rain is falling softly against stone. Perhaps a candle flickers in a quiet room, casting warm light against wooden walls. Perhaps you can imagine the scent of incense drifting through cool evening air. These images are not demands, they are invitations, nothing more. You may accept them, or you may let them pass. Either way, peace is already present within you. It does not need to be built or earned or discovered. It only needs to be uncovered, like clearing dust from a still mirror. The teachings we will explore tonight are ancient, simple and true. They come from a time when wisdom was shared beside fires and beneath stars. They speak not of gods or rules, but of the human heart, of how we suffer when we resist what is, of how we find freedom when we finally let go. And tonight, as you listen, you are invited to do just that. To let go of the day, the worries, the endless list of tasks, to release the need to understand everything, to control every outcome, to simply be here, breathing, resting, alive. The path we walk tonight is not a steep one. It does not require strength or determination. It requires only willingness to soften, to listen, to receive. And so, with that gentleness in mind, let us begin. Act 1. The arrival of stillness. There was once a temple built high in the mountains, far from any village. It sat nestled among pine trees, overlooking valleys that filled with mist each morning. The architecture was simple, wooden beams weathered by centuries of wind and snow. Stone pathways wound between buildings, smooth from countless footsteps over generations. The monks who lived there rose before dawn and walked these paths in silence. They swept the courtyards with bamboo brooms, the sounds soft and rhythmic. They tended small gardens where vegetables grew in neat rows. They prepared simple meals of rice, vegetables, and tea. And they sat in meditation for hours, facing the walls of the meditation hall. The hall itself was spare, no decorations, no ornaments, only bare walls and wooden floors. Light entered through high windows, casting slow-moving rectangles across the floor as the day progressed. The air inside was cool and still, carrying the faint scent of cedar. But among these monks was one who could not find peace. His name was Kensho, and he had come to the temple 3 years ago. He arrived with nothing but the clothes on his back and a burning desire for enlightenment. He had read about the great masters, about the sudden awakening that transforms consciousness. He had heard stories of monks who attained realization in a single instant, and he was determined to be one of them. So he practiced with fierce dedication. He studied the sutras with devotion, memorizing passage after passage. He sat in meditation long after the other monks had retired for the evening. He fasted, he prostrated, he pushed his body to its limits. He asked the master question after question, seeking the key to unlock enlightenment. But the more he searched, the more restless he became. His mind raced with thoughts. Am I doing it right? Why haven't I awakened yet? His body ached from the intensity of his practice. His heart felt heavy with disappointment and self-criticism. The other monks seemed peaceful, content with the simple rhythms of temple life. But Kensho felt like he was failing, falling behind, missing something essential. One evening, after another day of frustration and striving, Kensho approached the master. The old teacher was sitting beneath a cherry tree in the temple courtyard. It was early spring and the tree was in full bloom, branches heavy with pale pink blossoms. The master sat on a simple wooden bench, watching petals drift down to the ground. His face was weathered and kind, his eyes peaceful and clear. He wore the traditional robes of the order, faded from many washings. Kensho bowed low before approaching, as was the custom. "Master," he said, his voice tight with emotion, "I have practiced for 3 years, yet I am not enlightened. I meditate until my legs are numb and my back feels like it will break. I study the teachings until my eyes burn and my head aches. I follow every rule, every tradition, every instruction you have given. Yet peace eludes me, awakening eludes me, and I feel more lost than when I arrived. What am I doing wrong?" The master did not look at him immediately. He continued watching the petals fall, his expression unchanged. One petal landed on his knee, and he observed it with gentle attention. After a long silence, he finally spoke. "Do you see that petal?" the master asked, pointing to one that had just detached from a branch. "Yes, master," Kensho replied, following the path of the falling blossom. "Did it struggle to fall?" Kensho paused, considering the question carefully. "No, master, it simply fell." "Did it think about how to fall, which direction to take, how to land?" "No, master, it just let go of the branch and gravity carried it down." The master nodded slowly, picking up the petal from his knee. He held it delicately between his fingers, turning it in the fading light. "And yet," he said, "it reached the ground perfectly. It did not need to strain or force its way down. It did not need to study the teachings of falling. It simply released its grip on the branch and allowed nature to guide it." He looked up at Kensho then, his eyes warm with understanding. "You are trying to force your way to peace, as if it were a distant destination. You are gripping the branch so tightly that you cannot let go. You are striving so hard to become enlightened that you have forgotten to simply be. But peace is not something you arrive at through effort. It is not a prize to be won through determination. It is what remains when you stop struggling. It is what is revealed when you release your grip." Kensho stood in silence, the words settling into him like rain soaking into dry earth. He realized that he had been approaching his practice like a battle to be won. He had been treating enlightenment like an achievement, something to add to his list of accomplishments. He had been so focused on the goal that he had forgotten about the journey itself. He had been striving so hard that he had missed the very thing he was seeking. The master rose slowly from the bench, brushing petals from his robe. "Tonight," he said gently, "do not meditate, do not study, do not try to achieve anything. Simply sit beneath this tree and watch the petals fall. Do not analyze them, do not think about them, just watch. That is your practice, to be present without purpose, to witness without judgment, to exist without striving. Kensho bowed deeply, tears forming in his eyes. He had never received such simple instruction before. It felt almost too easy, too straightforward. But something in the master's words resonated deep within him, and so he did as he was told. He sat beneath the cherry tree as the sun set and the sky turned from blue to violet to deep indigo. He watched petal after petal drift downward through the cooling air. Some fell quickly, taking a direct path to the ground. Others spiraled slowly, caught by gentle breezes. Some landed on the grass, others on the stone pathway. Each one unique, each one perfect in its falling. And as he watched, something within him began to shift. At first, his mind tried to make meaning of it, tried to find the lesson, but gradually he let go of that need. He simply watched, without commentary, without analysis. The tightness in his chest began to loosen. The urgency in his mind started to quiet. The constant pressure to achieve something began to dissolve. He realized that he had been holding his breath for 3 years. Holding his breath, holding his body, holding his mind in a state of constant tension, waiting for permission to exhale, waiting for some external sign that he had done enough. But that permission was never coming from outside. It could only come from within. And so, as he sat beneath the tree, he finally gave himself that permission. He let his shoulders drop. He let his jaw unclench. He let his breath deepen and slow. He let his mind stop racing towards some imaginary future moment of awakening. He allowed himself to simply be here, now, beneath this tree, watching petals fall. And in that allowing, in that surrender, peace began to emerge. Not as something he had achieved, but as something that had always been there, waiting patiently beneath all the striving, all the effort, all the struggle. Like the ground beneath the falling petals, always there, always ready to receive. The petals continued to fall as darkness settled over the temple grounds. One by one, they released their hold on the branches and drifted down. And Kensho watched, his breath slow and steady, his heart finally at rest. There was nothing to achieve, nothing to prove, nothing to become. Only this: breath, stillness, and the gentle arrival of night. The master passed by later that evening and saw Kensho still sitting there. But he did not disturb him, did not check on his progress. He simply smiled to himself and continued walking the stone path. The student had finally stopped running, and in that stopping, the journey had truly begun. Breathe now, friend. Let the air move through you as it always has, without effort or thought. Notice how the body knows exactly what to do, even when the mind is restless. Notice how the breath flows in and out, like waves on a shore. There is a wisdom in the body that the mind often forgets, a knowing that does not require words or explanations. The heart knows how to beat, the lungs know how to expand and contract, the cells know how to divide, the blood knows how to flow. All of this happens without your conscious direction. All of this unfolds naturally, perfectly, moment by moment. And in the same way, peace knows how to emerge when you stop forcing it. Kensho's story is not unique. It is the story of all of us. We search for peace as if it was something hidden, buried far away. We think we need to travel great distances, undergo great transformations. We think we need to become someone different, someone wiser, someone more worthy. But peace is not in the future, not in some distant moment of achievement. It is here, right now, in the space between thoughts. It is here, in the softness of your breath flowing in and out. It is here in the way your body releases tension when you finally allow it. You do not need to become someone different to find it. You do not need to be wiser, calmer, more disciplined, more spiritual. You only need to stop struggling against what is already true. You only need to release your grip, like the petal releasing its hold on the branch. Where in your life are you holding on too tightly? Where are you trying to force outcomes, control circumstances, make things happen through sheer will? Where are you exhausting yourself in the pursuit of something you believe will finally make you complete? These questions are not meant to create more thinking, more analysis, more self-criticism. They are simply gentle invitations to notice, to become aware. And if the mind begins to answer them with long explanations, let those answers go. They are just thoughts, clouds crossing the sky of your awareness. They will pass, as all things do, if you do not hold on to them. For now, simply rest in this moment. Let the weight of the day dissolve into the softness of the present. Let your shoulders drop away from your ears. Let your jaw unclench and your tongue rest gently in your mouth. Let your brows smooth and your eyes soften behind closed lids. There is nothing you need to hold, nothing you need to protect, nothing you need to defend. The night is here to carry you, and it asks nothing in return. It does not require that you be perfect, enlightened, or transformed. It simply invites you to rest, to soften, to let go. And in that letting go, something ancient and true begins to emerge. Not as something new, but as something that has always been there. Like discovering a clear pool of water that has been waiting beneath layers of fallen leaves. The water was always there, always pure, always still. It only needed the leaves to be cleared away. And what clears them is not more effort, but less. Not more striving, but less. Not more doing, but simply being. So breathe now and be. Be here, be present, be still. Let the breath flow naturally, without trying to control it. Let the thoughts come and go, without trying to stop them. Let the body rest, without trying to make it relax. Everything knows what to do when you stop interfering. Everything returns to its natural state. When you stop forcing, like water finding its own level, like air filling an empty space. This is the teaching of the falling petal. This is the wisdom of surrender. This is the path to peace that is not a path at all, but simply a stopping of the struggle, a stopping of the striving, a stopping of the endless forward motion. And in that stopping, you arrive exactly where you have always been, home, here, now. Let yourself settle deeper now, deeper into the support beneath you. Feel how the earth holds you, how gravity anchors you, how you are supported without any effort. Imagine that you are that petal, releasing your grip on the branch, not because you have decided to fall, but because the time has come. Not because you are strong enough or worthy enough, but simply because it is time. And as you fall, you are held by the air itself. You do not plummet, you drift, you float, you dance with the currents. You do not know exactly where you will land, but you trust that the ground will be there. And when you finally come to rest, it is not an ending, but a returning to the earth from which the tree once grew, a returning to the source, the beginning, the eternal cycle of life. This is how it is with us as well. We spend our lives reaching upward, striving for the light, growing towards some imagined peak. But eventually we must let go. We must release our grip on all the things we thought defined us. Our achievements, our identities, our carefully constructed sense of self. And in that releasing, we discover that we do not fall into nothingness. We fall into everything. We return to the vastness from which we came. And we realize that we were never separate from it at all. The petal was never separate from the tree. Even as it hung on the branch, it was part of the whole organism, drawing sustenance from the roots, shaped by the same genetic code, existing in relationship with every other part. And when it falls, it does not cease to be part of the tree. It simply changes form, returning to the soil to nourish the roots that will grow new branches. In the same way, you are not separate from the whole of existence. You are not an isolated fragment, struggling alone in an indifferent universe. You are a unique expression of the entire cosmos, made of stardust, animated by the same energy that moves galaxies, connected to every other living thing through threads of relationship too intricate to fully comprehend. And when you finally let go of the illusion of separation, you do not lose yourself. You find yourself, your true self, your vast self, your infinite self. The self that is not bound by the body, not limited by the mind, not confined by time. The self that has always been free, always been whole, always been at peace. This is what Kensho glimpsed beneath the cherry tree. Not through effort or achievement, but through surrender and stillness. Through the simple act of watching petals fall and allowing his own defenses to fall with them. Layer by layer, the false self dissolved. Layer by layer, the true self was revealed. Not as something created or earned, but as something uncovered. Like brushing away sand to reveal the bedrock beneath. The bedrock was always there, it simply needed to be uncovered. And the uncovering happens not through adding more, but through taking away the tension, the striving, the constant forward motion, taking away the stories, the judgments, the endless commentary, taking away everything that is not essential until only essence remains. And essence is peace itself, unchanging, unshakable, ever present, not dependent on circumstances, not contingent on conditions. Always here, always available, always waiting patiently for you to notice it. So notice it now. Notice the peace that exists in the space between breaths. Notice the stillness that underlies all movement. Notice the silence that holds all sound. It is not somewhere else. It is here, in this very moment. Not tomorrow, not after you've fixed everything, not when you've finally become good enough, but now, exactly as you are, exactly as things are. This is enough. You are enough. All is enough. Act 2. The Blind Calligrapher. In a small village at the edge of a great forest, there lived a woman named Ayame. She was known throughout the region as a master calligrapher, one of the finest in the province. Merchants traveled from distant cities to commission her work for their shops and homes. Scholars sought her out to inscribe important texts and sacred sutras. Wealthy families commissioned her to create scrolls for special occasions, weddings, births, anniversaries. Her brushstrokes were legendary for their fluidity, their grace, their perfect balance. Each character seemed to flow from some deep source within her, appearing on paper fully formed. She worked in a small studio at the back of her family's home. The room had large windows that faced east, allowing morning light to flood the space. Her tools were simple but well maintained: brushes of various sizes, inkstones, rice paper. She prepared her own ink, grinding the solid ink stick against the stone with careful circular motions. She added water drop by drop, mixing until the consistency was exactly right. Then she would sit before the blank paper, brush in hand, and enter a state of deep concentration. In those moments, it seemed as though she disappeared, and only the brush remained, moving across the paper with confidence and precision, creating beauty from emptiness. Ayame had been practicing calligraphy since she was a young girl. Her father had been a calligrapher before her, and his father before that. She had grown up watching him work, absorbing the principles through observation and imitation. By the time she was 15, her skill had surpassed her father's. By 20, she had developed her own distinctive style. By 25, her reputation had spread across multiple provinces. She took deep pride in her work, finding meaning and purpose in the creation of beauty. She loved the meditative quality of the practice, the way it required total presence. She loved the challenge of capturing the essence of a word or poem in visual form. She loved knowing that her work would outlast her, bringing beauty to future generations. But when Ayame was 32 years old, everything changed. An illness came to the village, affecting many, families including her own. Most people recovered within a few weeks, though some were left weakened. Ayame survived the illness, but it left her with a devastating consequence. Her sight began to fade, slowly at first, then more rapidly. Colors became muted, then indistinct. Shapes blurred at the edges, then dissolved entirely. Within 6 months, the world that had once been filled with color and light had faded into darkness. She could no longer see the paper, the brush, the ink forming characters. She could no longer distinguish light from shadow, shape from emptiness. At first, she despaired deeply. How could a calligrapher create without seeing the paper, the ink, the form of each character? Calligraphy was a visual art. It required precision, spatial awareness, perfect proportion. It required being able to see where each stroke began and ended. It required being able to judge the balance of negative and positive space. Without sight, she believed, her art was impossible. Her identity as a calligrapher, the thing that had given her life meaning and purpose, was gone. She withdrew from her work and spent her days in silence, grieving the life she had lost. She would not see visitors, would not discuss her condition, would not consider any alternatives. She sat in her studio, surrounded by brushes and paper she could no longer use. The morning light still flooded through the east-facing windows, but she could no longer see it, and so it felt meaningless. Weeks turned into months, and her hands grew stiff from disuse. The muscles that had once guided the brush with such precision began to atrophy. The calluses on her fingers, earned from years of practice, began to soften. Her brushes gathered dust, her inkstones sat unused, her papers yellowed in their storage boxes. Friends and family tried to console her, but she refused their comfort. They did not understand, she thought, what it meant to lose the thing that defined you. They did not know what it was like to have your purpose stripped away. She felt as though she had died, even though her body continued to live. The person she had been, Ayami the calligrapher, no longer existed, and she did not know who she was supposed to become. 6 months passed in this state of grief and withdrawal, but one evening, as autumn settled over the village, a travelling monk knocked on her door. He was an older man, weathered from years on the road, with kind eyes and a gentle demeanour. He had heard of Ayami's reputation years before, and had travelled far to commission a poem for his temple. He did not know of her blindness, did not know that she had stopped practicing. Ayami's mother answered the door and explained the situation to the monk. "My daughter is no longer a calligrapher," she said sadly. "She lost her sight and can no longer create." The monk listened quietly, nodding with understanding, but then he asked, "May I speak with her? I have travelled many days to be here." The mother hesitated, then agreed. She led the monk to Ayami's studio, where her daughter sat in the near darkness. Ayami did not rise when the monk entered, did not greet him formally. She simply sat in her chair, her face turned toward the window she could no longer see through. "I am honored to meet you," the monk said, bowing though she could not see it. "I have heard of your legendary skill and hoped you might create a poem for our temple." "I am no longer a calligrapher," Ayami said flatly. "I cannot see, I cannot create. You have wasted your journey." The monk was quiet for a moment, then moved closer and sat on the floor near her chair. "I am sorry for your loss," he said gently. "It must be a great grief to bear." Ayami said nothing, her jaw tight with suppressed emotion. After a long silence, the monk spoke again. "May I ask you something?" Ayami shrugged, neither granting permission nor refusing it. "When you created your work before, when your sight was still whole, what did you see?" Ayami frowned, confused by the question. "I saw the paper before me, the brush in my hand, the ink forming each character. I saw the shape of each stroke, the space between elements, the balance of the composition." The monk shook his head gently. "No," he said softly. "What did you truly see? Not with your eyes, but with something deeper. When you created your finest work, what were you really perceiving?" Ayami sat with the question, her confusion deepening. She started to answer several times, then stopped, unsure. What was he asking? Of course she saw the paper, the brush, the ink, but as she sat with the question, something began to shift in her understanding. She remembered certain moments in her practice when she had been most deeply absorbed. Moments when time seemed to stop and self-consciousness disappeared entirely. Moments when the brush seemed to move on its own, guided by something beyond conscious thought. In those moments, what had she been seeing? She had been seeing the essence of the word or poem she was inscribing. She had been perceiving the emotional quality, the spiritual resonance, the living meaning. She had been feeling the rhythm and flow, the movement and stillness, the balance of opposites. She had been connecting with something intangible, something that existed beyond the physical materials. I saw the spirit of the words, she said slowly, the realization dawning, the feeling behind them, the energy, the intention, the life force they carried. Yes, the monk said softly, and she could hear the smile in his voice. Then you have not lost what matters most. Your eyes were never the source of your art. They were merely a tool, one way of perceiving among many. But it was always your heart that guided the brush, your spirit that animated the characters. And those remain untouched by the illness that took your sight. Tears began to fall from Ayame's sightless eyes. She had been so focused on what she had lost that she had not considered what remained. She had assumed that without physical sight, creation was impossible. But the monk was suggesting something else entirely. That there were other ways of seeing, deeper ways, truer ways. That the essence of her art had never been about physical perception at all. I do not know if I can, she whispered. Of course you do not know, the monk replied gently. How could you know before you try? But the not knowing is not a barrier. It is an invitation to discover what wants to emerge when control is released. An invitation to trust what arises from the depths rather than from the surface. That night, after the monk had retired to the guest room, Ayame sat alone in her studio. She lit a lamp, though she could not see its light, simply because it felt like the ritual was important. She prepared her materials by touch, finding the inkstone, the ink stick, the water. She ground the ink slowly, feeling the circular motion, listening to the sound of stone on stone. She added water drop by drop, using her fingers to test the consistency. She selected a brush, running her fingers along the bamboo handle, feeling the weight of it. She positioned a sheet of paper before her, smoothing it flat with her palms. And then she sat, brush in hand, feeling terror and excitement in equal measure. She had no idea if this would work, no idea if she could create anything worthwhile. She could not see where the brush was in relation to the paper. She could not see if the ink was flowing properly, or if the strokes were balanced. She could not see anything at all, she could only feel. She dipped the brush into the ink, feeling the liquid saturate the bristles. She held it above where she believed the paper to be. And then, with a deep breath, she released control. She did not think about technique or form or proportion. She simply felt the character she wanted to create, felt its essence, its energy, its meaning. And she let her hand move. At first, her hand trembled violently. Fear and doubt surged through her. Fear of failure, doubt about her abilities. But she breathed through it, allowing the trembling without trying to stop it. And gradually, slowly, something deeper took over. She felt the rhythm of the character beginning to flow through her. She felt the energy moving from her center down her arm into her hand. She felt the brush connecting with the paper, dragging the ink across the surface. She could not see what she was creating, but she could feel it. She could feel when a stroke was complete, when it was time to lift the brush and begin the next one. She could feel the balance of the composition, the relationship between elements. She could feel the life force moving through her, expressing itself through the medium of ink and paper. It was terrifying and exhilarating, this practice of trusting the unseen. It required a surrender she had never experienced before, even at the height of her abilities. It required letting go of judgment, letting go of expectations, letting go of the need for perfection. It required faith in something deeper than conscious control. When she finally lifted the brush from the paper for the last time, she sat back, exhausted. She had no idea if what she had created was beautiful or terrible. She had no idea if the characters were even legible, or if they were wildly off-center. All she knew was that something had moved through her, something authentic and true, and that the act of creating had brought her back to life in a way she had not felt in months. She called softly for the monk, who came to the studio carrying a candle. He approached the table and looked down at the paper in silence. Ayame sat with her hands folded, her heart pounding, waiting for his verdict. The silence stretched on, and she began to fear the worst. But then the monk spoke, his voice filled with reverence. "This is the finest calligraphy I have ever seen," he said quietly. "It is not perfect in form. Some strokes are uneven, some characters slightly off-center, but it is perfect in spirit. There is a vitality here, a presence that I have never encountered before. These characters seem to breathe with life. You have discovered something that most calligraphers spend their entire lives seeking. You have found the essence of the art, the spirit beneath the form." Ayame bowed her head, tears streaming down her face once more. But these were different tears, tears of relief, of gratitude, of recognition. She had spent so long mourning what she had lost. She had been so consumed by grief that she could not imagine a future. But in losing her sight, she had been forced to find something far greater. She had been forced to move beyond technique and control and perfection. She had been forced to trust the unseen, to surrender to the unknown. And in that surrender, she had discovered the true source of her art. Not her eyes, not her technical skill, not her accumulated knowledge, but her spirit, her essence, the life force that moved through her. From that night forward, Ayame began to practice again. She created in darkness, trusting her hands, trusting her heart, trusting the creative energy that flowed through her. Word of her new work spread quickly, and her reputation grew even greater than before. People said her brushstrokes now carried a depth and authenticity that transcended mere technical perfection. They said her characters seemed alive, imbued with a presence that could not be taught or learned. They said that looking at her work was like glimpsing something eternal, something beyond the material world. And when people asked her how she created such beauty without sight, she would smile and say, "I simply let the brush move where it needs to go. I do not control it. I listen to it. I do not impose my will. I follow the energy." And in that listening, in that following, I am more free than I ever was when I could see. Blindness was not a curse. It was a gift that taught me to see in a different way. To see with the heart, to see with the spirit, to see with the part of me that never needed eyes at all. Let this story settle into you now, like water soaking into earth. Let it rest in your heart, in your body, in the quiet spaces of your awareness. Notice what it stirs within you, what it loosens, what it invites you to consider. Ayam's blindness was not the tragedy it first appeared to be. It was an invitation, painful, unwelcome, but ultimately transformative. An invitation to release control, to trust the unseen, to discover deeper ways of knowing. We live in a world that values sight, control, precision, perfection. We are taught to analyze everything, to plan every outcome, to force results into being through willpower. We are taught that success comes from mastering technique, from controlling variables, from leaving nothing to chance. And there is wisdom in skill, in practice, in the cultivation of ability. But sometimes the deepest truths can only be found when we release our grip on control, when we acknowledge that we cannot see everything, cannot know everything, cannot control everything. When we admit that there are dimensions of reality beyond what our physical senses can perceive. Ayame had to lose her physical sight to develop her spiritual sight. She had to release her reliance on technical perfection to discover authentic expression. She had to move beyond what she knew to discover what she did not know she knew. This is the paradox at the heart of all creative work, all spiritual practice, all genuine living. We must learn the rules, develop the skills, master the techniques. But then we must learn to forget them, to set them aside, to move beyond them. We must practice until the practice becomes effortless, until conscious control gives way to unconscious flow. We must work until the work transforms from doing to being, from effort to grace. This is what the ancients called Wu Wei, effortless action. Action that arises from alignment rather than from force. Like water flowing downhill, taking the path of least resistance, yet capable of carving through stone over time. Like the brush moving across paper, guided not by conscious thought but by embodied knowing. Like the breath moving through the body, happening without any need for conscious direction. Where in your life are you trying to control everything, see everything, know everything? Where are you gripping so tightly that you cannot receive what wants to come through you? Where are you relying so heavily on conscious direction that you have forgotten how to trust the wisdom of the body, the heart, the spirit? These questions are not invitations to abandon skill or knowledge or careful thought. They are invitations to balance doing with allowing, control with trust, knowing with not knowing. To recognize that sometimes the greatest breakthroughs come not from adding more, but from taking away. Not from seeing more, but from seeing differently. Not from doing more, but from being more. Breathe now and let these reflections rest. Let them settle without needing to analyze or understand them completely. The mind wants to grasp, to categorize, to file everything away in neat compartments. But wisdom is often too fluid for that, too alive, too mysterious. It must be felt more than thought, intuited more than explained, lived more than theorized. So simply breathe and feel. Feel the rise and fall of the chest, the expansion and contraction of the belly. Feel the cool air entering through the nose, the warm air leaving through slightly parted lips. Feel the weight of the body, the sensation of contact with the surface beneath you. Feel the aliveness that courses through you, the energy that animates this form you inhabit. This is your direct experience, immediate and undeniable, not mediated by thought, not filtered through belief, not dependent on external validation. Simply this, the felt sense of being alive in this moment. And in this feeling, there is a knowing that goes beyond intellectual understanding, a knowing that you are held, supported, connected to something vast and benevolent, a knowing that even in darkness, even in uncertainty, even in the complete absence of control, you are not alone. There is a wisdom moving through you, through all things, through the very fabric of existence. And when you release your grip on control, when you stop insisting on seeing every step of the path ahead, this wisdom can guide you, not by telling you what to do, but by moving through you, as you. Like the brush moved through Ayame, creating beauty from emptiness. Like the breath moves through you now, sustaining life without any conscious direction. This is the teaching of the blind calligrapher. This is the wisdom of surrender. This is the path that opens when we release our insistence on always knowing, always seeing, always being in control. And on this path, we discover a creativity and aliveness and freedom that was never available through control. We discover that we are far more than we thought we were, that we contain depths we never suspected, capacities we never imagined, connections we never recognized. We discover that life is not something to be managed and controlled, but something to be danced with and trusted, something to be received more than achieved, allowed more than forced, surrendered to more than conquered. So rest in that now. Rest in the not knowing, the not seeing, the not controlling. Rest in the trust that something larger is holding you, guiding you, moving through you. Rest in the faith that even in darkness, especially in darkness, you can find your way. Not by seeing the entire path, but by feeling for the next step. Not by controlling the outcome, but by trusting the process. Not by gripping tightly, but by letting go. And in that letting go, you may discover, as Ayame did, that you have not lost anything essential. You have only released what was never truly yours to hold. And in that releasing, you have made space for something far greater to emerge. Act 3. The Temple Cat. There was once a monastery in the foothills of a great mountain range, where 20 monks lived and practiced together. The monastery was old, built centuries ago by monks whose names had been lost to time. The buildings were constructed of dark wood and stone, weathered by countless seasons of rain and snow. The roofs curved upward at the edges in the traditional style, covered with tiles that had turned green with moss. A wall enclosed the monastery grounds, but it was low and crumbling in places, more symbolic than secure. Inside the walls were several buildings, a main hall for ceremonies and meditation, sleeping quarters for the monks, a kitchen and dining hall, a library and various storage structures. Between the buildings were courtyards with carefully raked gravel and small gardens with stone lanterns. The monks who lived there followed a rigorous schedule. They rose before dawn, when the sky was still dark and stars still visible. They gathered in the meditation hall and sat in rows on cushions facing the wall. For an hour they sat in silence, their backs straight, their hands folded in the traditional mudra. After meditation came morning chants, the the deep voices of the monks filling the hall with sacred syllables. Then they would file out to the dining hall for a simple breakfast of rice porridge and tea. The rest of the day was divided between meditation periods, work practice, study, and more meals. Everything was done in silence or with minimal speech. Everything was done with attention and care as a form of practice. Even the simplest tasks, sweeping a path, preparing vegetables, washing bowls, were treated as opportunities for mindfulness. The evening meditation was the longest and most sacred. As the sun set and shadows lengthened across the courtyard, the monks would gather once more in the hall. They would light candles and incense, filling the space with soft light and fragrant smoke. Then they would take their seats and settle into the deep silence of Zazen. This evening, meditation lasted for 2 hours, divided into several periods with brief walking, meditation between. It was the heart of their practice, the still center around which everything else revolved. But there was one significant problem that had been disrupting this sacred time for several months. A cat lived in the monastery, a small orange tabby with bright green eyes and white paws. No one was quite sure where she had come from or how long she had been there. She simply appeared one day and made herself at home, as cats often do. She slept in sunny spots during the day, hunted mice in the storage buildings, and begged for scraps at meal times. For the most part, the monks tolerated her presence, even appreciated it. She kept the rodent population under control and added a certain warmth to the austere environment. But every evening during the sacred meditation period, the cat became a terrible nuisance. She would wander into the meditation hall, seeming to appear from nowhere, and then she would proceed to disturb the monks in various ways. Sometimes she would weave between them, rubbing against their robes and purring loudly. Sometimes she would climb into someone's lap and knead their legs with her paws, claws extended. Sometimes she would bat at the sleeves of their robes or pounce on the ties of their sitting cushions. Once she knocked over a candle, causing a brief panic until it was quickly extinguished. Another time she jumped onto the altar and scattered offerings everywhere. The monks tried to remain focused, tried to treat her presence as just another phenomenon to observe without attachment, but it was deeply distracting, especially for the younger monks who were still developing their concentration. Even the more experienced monks found their attention pulled away by the soft padding of paws, the sudden purr against an ankle, the gentle thud of the cat jumping onto someone's lap. The monks tried various solutions. They tried shooing her away before meditation began, but she would slip back in through cracks in the walls. They tried closing the doors more securely, but she would sit outside and meow plaintively until someone let her in. They tried locking her in one of the storage buildings during meditation, but she howled so loudly that it was more disruptive than her presence would have been. One monk suggested feeding her right before meditation so she would be sleepy, but this had no effect. Another suggested giving her to a nearby village, but this idea was quickly rejected. The monks were committed to non-harm, and abandoning an animal seemed contrary to that principle. Finally, after months of frustration, the abbot, the senior monk who led the community, called a special meeting. It was unusual to call a meeting specifically about such a minor issue, but the cat had become a source of significant tension. The monks gathered in a circle in the main hall, and the abbot invited each person to speak about the situation. The younger monks were most frustrated, feeling that their practice was being undermined. Some of the middle monks suggested more creative solutions, building a special enclosure, training the cat, even consulting a local expert in animal behavior. But the eldest monk, a woman named Etsuko, who had lived at the monastery for over 40 years, had been silent throughout. Finally, the abbot turned to her and asked for her perspective. Etsuko sat quietly for a moment, her weathered face calm and thoughtful. She had seen many problems arise and dissolve in her decades at the monastery. She had learned that most difficulties arose not from external circumstances, but from internal resistance. Perhaps, she said slowly, the cat is not the problem. The younger monks looked confused, even irritated by this suggestion. Of course, the cat was the problem. She was the one disrupting the meditation. But Etsuko continued gently. The cat simply behaves as a cat behaves. She is curious, affectionate, playful. This is her nature. She does not intend to disrupt our practice. She is simply being herself. Our irritation is not caused by the cat. It is caused by our resistance to her presence. We want the meditation hall to be a certain way, silent, still, controlled, and when it is not that way, we suffer. But who says meditation must happen only in perfect silence, only in perfect stillness? Can we not practice acceptance and equanimity even when conditions are not ideal? The abbot considered this carefully. There was wisdom in Etsuko's words, but there was also a practical problem. The younger monks needed to develop concentration, and constant distraction made that very difficult. Perhaps a middle path was needed, a solution that honored both the cat's nature and the monk's need for focused practice. What if, the abbot suggested, we acknowledge both truths? The cat will be a cat, and the monks need conditions conducive to deepening their practice. Rather than trying to exclude her or change her behavior, what if we simply create a boundary? Not to punish her, but to help her settle, and in her settling, to help us settle as well. Etsuko nodded thoughtfully, and together they devised a solution. Before each evening meditation, they would gently tie the cat to a wooden post near the entrance of the hall. The rope would be long enough for her to sit or lie down comfortably, but short enough to prevent her from roaming. She would still be present in the space, but contained in a way that allowed the monks to practice without constant interruption. They would place a soft cushion for her to rest on, and one monk would check on her during the walking meditation breaks. That very evening, they implemented this new approach. The monk assigned to cat duty, a young man named Jiro who had grown fond of her, brought her into the hall just before meditation began. He spoke to her softly as he fashioned a gentle collar from a piece of soft cloth and attached the rope. He tied the rope to the sturdy wooden post that supported one of the roof beams near the entrance. He placed a small cushion near the post and gently guided the cat to sit on it. Then he gave her a few strokes along her back, settled onto his own cushion, and the meditation began. The cat sat quietly for a few moments, looking around with her bright green eyes. Then she lay down on the cushion, curled into a ball, and fell asleep. For the first time in months, the monks meditated in uninterrupted silence. There were no gentle thuds of paws, no unexpected purrs, no sudden pounces, just the sound of breathing, the occasional creak of the wooden building settling, the distant call of an evening bird. The practice deepened, the stillness thickened, and when the meditation period ended, many monks felt they had touched something profound. Years passed, and the evening ritual continued. Before each meditation, The cat was tied to the post. She grew accustomed to it and would often appear at the meditation hall on her own, waiting to be settled on her cushion. Eventually, she grew old, as all living things do. Her orange fur faded to a paler shade. Her green eyes grew cloudy. Her movements became slower and stiffer. And one morning, the monks found her lying peacefully on her cushion, having passed away quietly in her sleep. They buried her beneath a cherry tree in the courtyard with a small ceremony honoring her presence in their community. But the practice continued. Before each evening meditation, a monk would take the rope and tie it to the wooden post, exactly as they had done when the cat was alive. It had become part of the ritual, woven into the fabric of their practice. The rope being tied marked the transition from the active work of the day to the deep stillness of evening meditation. It was a signal to the mind and body. Now is the time to settle. Now is the time to turn inward. Decades passed. Monks grew old and left or died. New monks arrived and were trained in the traditions of the monastery. The practice of tying the rope continued, passed down from one generation to the next. None of the younger monks questioned it. It was simply what was done, part of the established ritual. Then one autumn, a new abbot arrived at the monastery. He had trained at a different monastery with different traditions, and he brought fresh eyes to the practices here. One evening, as he observed the preparations for meditation, he watched a monk carefully tie the empty rope to the wooden post. The monk performed the action with great reverence, as though it were a sacred act. After the meditation, the new abbot approached this monk, a middle-aged man named Kenji who had been at the monastery for 20 years. "Excuse me," the abbot said gently. "May I ask you about the rope?" "Of course, abbot," Kenji replied, bowing respectfully. "Why do you tie an empty rope to the post before meditation?" Kenji looked confused by this question. "It has always been done this way," he said. "It is part of our evening ritual, part of the preparation for meditation." "But do you know why it began?" the abbot asked. Kenji thought carefully, but he realized he did not know. The practice had simply always been there, for as long as he had been at the monastery. He had learned it from the monks who were there when he arrived, and they had learned it from the monks before them. The abbot asked several other monks, but none of them could explain the origin of the practice. It had been passed down so long that its original purpose had been completely forgotten. The form had been preserved, but the meaning had been lost. Finally, the abbot found the monastery's records, old journals kept by previous abbots, chronicling the daily life of the community. After much searching, he found an entry from 60 years ago describing the cat and the solution devised to manage her presence during meditation. The next evening, the abbot called the community together and shared what he had discovered. He told them the story of the orange tabby cat, of Etsuko's wisdom, of the compassionate solution that honored both the cat's nature and the monk's needs. When he finished, the monks sat in stunned silence. They had been performing a ritual whose purpose they did not understand, whose origin they did not know. They had been tying an empty rope to a post because it had always been done that way. They had been preserving a form without comprehending its essence. Some of the monks felt embarrassed, even foolish, but the abbot spoke with compassion. There is no shame in following tradition, in honoring the practices passed down to us. But we must also understand that traditions arise for specific reasons in specific contexts. The cat was tied to the post not as an end in itself, but as a skillful means to address a particular situation. The practice served its purpose beautifully. It honored the cat while preserving conditions for deep meditation. But when the cat was gone, the rope became unnecessary. And yet we continued to tie it, not because it served a purpose, but because we had forgotten to question it. True practice is not about blindly repeating rituals. It is about being present with what is actually needed in this moment. It is about understanding the spirit beneath the form, the intention beneath the action. Let us release the rope, not because there is anything wrong with it, but because its time has passed. And let us remember that the essence of our practice is not in any particular form, but in the quality of attention and presence we bring to each moment. And so that evening, they did not tie the rope. The post remained, a reminder of the story, but the rope was set aside. And the monks found that their meditation did not suffer for the loss of this ritual. In fact, for many, it deepened because they were no longer going through the motions, no longer performing actions whose meaning they did not understand. They were present with the practice itself, the breath, the posture, the stillness, the silence. Not dependent on any external ritual to mark the transition, but able to find that stillness within themselves. The rope had served its purpose, and then it had become a barrier, and releasing it was its own kind of practice, the practice of letting go of what no longer serves, no matter how comfortable or familiar it has become. Rest here, now, letting this teaching settle into your awareness. Let it rest without needing to extract a lesson, without needing to apply it immediately to your life. Just let it sit there, like a seed planted in fertile soil, waiting for the right conditions to sprout. The story of the cat and the rope speaks to something fundamental about human nature. We are creatures of habit, of ritual, of familiar patterns. There is deep wisdom in this. Habits and rituals provide structure, continuity, meaning. They connect us to our past, to our communities, to something larger than our individual selves. They create containers for sacred experience, marking transitions and holding space for what matters most. The problem arises not with ritual itself, but when we forget why we are performing the ritual. When the form becomes detached from its original function, when the means becomes the end, when we continue to do something simply because we have always done it, without examining whether it still serves. This happens in spiritual practice, certainly. How many religious traditions maintain rituals whose meanings have been lost? But it happens in every area of life. In relationships, we may continue patterns of interaction that once served but no longer do. In work, we may follow procedures that were designed for conditions that no longer exist. In our daily routines, we may maintain habits that once supported us but now limit us. The rope was once necessary. It genuinely solved a problem and created conditions for deeper practice. But when the cat was gone, the rope became just another thing to maintain, another action to perform, another form to preserve. It became, ironically, a distraction from the very thing it was meant to protect. How many ropes are you still tying in your own life? How many habits, beliefs, or patterns do you repeat simply because they are familiar? Not all rituals need to be abandoned. Many are beautiful, meaningful, and genuinely supportive. But it is worth asking, is this practice serving me, or am I serving the practice? Is this habit supporting my growth, Or is it keeping me stuck? Is this belief opening me to truth or closing me off from possibility? Am I present with what I am doing, or am I simply going through the motions? These questions are not meant to create judgment or urgency. They are not meant to suggest that you must immediately overhaul your entire life. They are simply invitations to notice, to become aware, to bring consciousness to what may have become unconscious. And in that noticing, you may find that some things naturally fall away. Not because you force them to leave, not because you judge them as wrong or bad, but because they are simply no longer needed, like leaves falling from a tree in autumn. The tree does not mourn the loss of its leaves. It recognizes that this is the natural cycle. The leaves serve their purpose in spring and summer, capturing sunlight and producing energy. But in autumn, that purpose is complete, and holding on to them would only burden the tree through winter. So the tree releases them, not with regret, but with trust in the wisdom of the seasons. In the same way, you can release what no longer serves you, not with self-criticism, I can't believe I was still doing that, but with compassion and understanding. Of course you were doing it. It once served a purpose, and habits are designed to persist. But now, with awareness, you can choose differently. You can honor what was, thank it for its service, and let it go. Making space for what is actually needed now, in this moment, in these conditions. Breathe now and feel that possibility. Feel the space that opens when you release even one unnecessary thing. Feel how the body softens when you stop carrying what you do not need to carry. Feel how the mind clears when you stop maintaining patterns that no longer serve. There is a lightness that comes with letting go. Not the lightness of emptiness, but the lightness of appropriate burden. Like a traveler who realizes halfway through a journey that their pack is filled with unnecessary items. At first, it's hard to imagine releasing anything. What if I need it later? But once you set aside what is not essential, the relief is immediate and undeniable. The journey becomes easier, the pace quickens, the joy returns. This is what the monks discovered when they stopped tying the rope. They had thought the ritual was essential, that removing it would somehow diminish their practice. But instead, their practice deepened, became more direct, more authentic, because they were no longer mediating their experience through an unnecessary form. They were meeting the present moment directly, without the filter of inherited tradition they did not understand. So consider gently what you might be ready to set aside. What rope are you still tying out of habit rather than necessity? What ritual have you inherited that once served someone else's needs but does not serve yours? What pattern are you maintaining because it feels safe and familiar, even though it no longer supports your growth? And as you consider this, do so with kindness. There is no urgency, no pressure, no judgment. The rope will still be there tomorrow if you need it, but perhaps, just perhaps, you will find that you do not. That you are ready to meet this moment fresh, without the weight of unnecessary forms. That you are ready to practice in a way that is alive, responsive, true to what is actually needed now. This is the teaching of the temple cat. This is the wisdom of letting go of what no longer serves. This is the freedom that comes from examining our habits with clear eyes and compassionate hearts. And in this freedom, we discover a practice that is not bound by form, not limited by tradition, not constrained by the past. A practice that is spacious enough to hold whatever arises, flexible enough to adapt to changing conditions, authentic enough to meet the truth of this moment. So breathe and rest in that spaciousness now. Let the breath move naturally without any need to control or direct it. Let the thoughts come and go without any need to hold on to them or push them away. Let the body rest without any need to maintain any particular posture or appearance. Let it all be exactly as it is, without adding anything, without taking anything away. Just this moment, just this breath, just this gentle presence. Free from the burden of unnecessary forms, free from the weight of unexamined habits. Simply here, simply now, simply being. This is enough. You are enough. All is enough.
This is so. The night continues to deepen around you, and the silence grows richer. It is a silence that is not empty but full of possibility, full of presence, full of peace. You are held in this silence, supported by it, nourished by it. There is nowhere you need to go, nothing you need to do, no one you need to become. Only this. Rest, release, and gentle letting go. Let the stories settle deeper now, becoming part of you. The teaching of the falling petal, that peace comes through surrender, not through striving. The teaching of the blind calligrapher, that true vision comes from the heart, not from the eyes. The teaching of the temple cat, that we must release what no longer serves, even when it is familiar and comfortable. These are not separate teachings but different facets of the same truth. The truth that life is not meant to be controlled, conquered or mastered. It is meant to be met, received, danced with, allowed. And when we finally stop resisting, stop forcing, stop holding on so tightly, we discover something miraculous. We discover that we are already home, already whole, already at peace. Not because we have achieved something, but because we have stopped running from what has always been here. So rest now, deeply and completely. Let every muscle soften, every joint relax, every cell release its burden. Let the mind grow quiet, the thoughts slowing like a river approaching the sea. Let the heart open, no longer protecting, no longer defending, no longer afraid. You are safe here, held by something far greater than your small self, held by the same force that holds the stars in the sky, that guides the seasons through their cycles, that animates all of life. And in this holding, you can finally let go. Let go of the day, the week, the year, the lifetime of accumulation. Let go of who you think you should be, what you think you should have accomplished, how you think things should have turned out. Let go of the stories, the judgments, the endless comparing and measuring and evaluating. Let it all fall away like petals from a cherry tree, like leaves in autumn, like rope being untied from a post. And in that falling away, discover what remains, what has always been here beneath all the doing and striving and maintaining. The simple fact of your existence, your being, your consciousness, the awareness that witnesses all experience but is touched by none of it, the peace that is not dependent on circumstances, not contingent on conditions, not earned through achievement, the peace that simply is and has always been and will always be. Rest in that now, let everything else go. There is only this breath, this moment,
this eternal now, and it is enough. It has always been enough. It will always be enough. Sasti asked for the burning library. In the heart of an ancient city, there stood a great library that had endured for over 1,000 years. It was not merely a building, but an institution, a living symbol of humanity's quest for knowledge and preservation of wisdom. The library occupied an entire block of the old quarter, a complex of interconnected structures built across different centuries. The original building was constructed of massive stone blocks, quarried from mountains far to the north. Over time, wooden additions had been built, then more stone wings, then courtyards enclosed with covered walkways. The result was a labyrinth of halls, chambers, reading rooms, and storage spaces. Some rooms had high ceilings with clerestory windows that admitted streams of daylight. Others were deep and windowless, their interiors illuminated only by lamps and candles. The walls were lined from floor to ceiling with shelves, and the shelves were filled with texts. There were tens of thousands of scrolls, manuscripts, and bound volumes. Ancient sutras copied by monks centuries ago. Their characters faded but still legible. Scientific treatises from the classical period, diagrams illustrating the movements of celestial bodies. Historical chronicles recording the rise and fall of dynasties, wars won and lost, treaties signed and broken. Poetry collections from every era, love poems and laments, nature poems and philosophical meditations. Medical texts describing treatments and remedies, maps of the body's meridians and pressure points, works of philosophy exploring questions of ethics, metaphysics, cosmology, and the nature of mind, dictionaries and lexicons of extinct languages, keys to understanding cultures long vanished, personal diaries and letters, giving voice to ordinary people whose lives would otherwise be forgotten. The library held not just the great works of famous scholars, but the accumulated knowledge of countless generations. It represented humanity's desire to remember, to preserve, to pass wisdom forward through time. And presiding over this vast collection was the head librarian, an old man named Takumi. He had come to the library as a young apprentice at the age of 15, learning the craft of preservation and cataloguing. He had studied under the previous head librarian, learning not just practical skills, but a philosophy of stewardship. "We are not owners of these texts," his master had told him. "We are their caretakers, their servants. Our job is not to control who has access to knowledge, but to ensure that knowledge survives to reach future generations. We are a bridge between past and future, and we must maintain that bridge with devotion and humility." Takumi had taken these words deeply to heart. By the time he was 30, he had been appointed assistant head librarian. By 40, he had become head librarian himself, a position he had now held for over 30 years. He knew the collection intimately, could navigate its halls in the dark, could locate almost any text from memory. He had devoted his entire life to this work, forsaking marriage and family to serve the library. It was not a sacrifice in his mind. It was a calling, the highest purpose he could imagine. He took deep pride in the preservation work, the careful repair of damaged texts, the meticulous cataloguing of new acquisitions. He loved the quiet of the reading rooms where scholars bent over texts in concentration. He loved the smell of old paper and leather bindings, the feel of parchment beneath his fingers. He loved knowing that he was part of something larger than himself, part of a lineage of knowledge keepers stretching back centuries. The library was not just his workplace, it was his home, his identity, his reason for being. He often stayed late into the night, making his rounds through the halls by lantern light, checking that everything was secure, that no candles had been left burning, that all was in order. Sometimes he would pause before a particular shelf and run his hand along the spines of the volumes there, remembering the first time he had read this text or recalling the scholar who had donated that collection. Each book was not just an object, but a living connection to the past, a voice speaking across time, and he was the guardian of these voices, ensuring they would continue to speak to future generations. Then came the night that changed everything. Takumi was in his small office adjoining the main reading room, working by candlelight on a cataloging project. He was creating a detailed inventory of a recently acquired collection of astronomical texts. It was meticulous work requiring careful attention, comparing titles and descriptions, noting condition and provenance. He had been at it for several hours when he first smelled smoke. At first, he thought perhaps someone had left a lamp burning in one of the reading rooms. But as he stood and stepped into the hallway, the smell grew stronger, more acrid, and then he heard it, shouting from somewhere outside the library, the sound of running feet. He hurried to the main entrance and opened the heavy wooden door. The sight that greeted him made his heart stop. Fire had broken out in the old quarter, possibly from an overturned brazier in one of the crowded tenement buildings. The flames had spread quickly, jumping from one wooden structure to another, pushed by a steady wind. Already, several blocks were engulfed, the sky lit orange and red, smoke billowing into the night. People were fleeing their homes, carrying what they could: children, elderly parents, bundles of possessions. The streets were chaos, a river of humanity flowing away from the flames, and the fire was advancing directly toward the library. Takumi stood frozen, his mind struggling to comprehend the situation. The library had survived wars, had endured political upheavals, had weathered centuries of change. Surely it could not be destroyed now, in a single night, by a simple fire. But even as he tried to deny what he was seeing, he knew the truth. The library was mostly wood and paper, the most flammable materials imaginable. If the fire reached it, the entire collection would be consumed within hours. 1,000 years of accumulated knowledge would turn to ash. His first instinct was action. He must save the texts, as many as possible. He rushed back inside, his mind racing, trying to prioritize. What should be saved first? The oldest and rarest manuscripts, certainly. The unique texts that existed nowhere else in the world. But how could he choose? How could he decide which voices from the past would be preserved and which would be silenced forever? He grabbed a large basket and began pulling volumes from the nearest shelf. His hands were shaking, his breathing rapid and shallow. He filled the basket and carried it to the entrance, setting it down outside. Then he ran back for more, his mind churning with impossible calculations. There were tens of thousands of texts. Even if he worked all night, he could save only a tiny fraction. As he was gathering a second basket, a student arrived. A young woman named May, who had been studying at the library for the past year. She had heard about the fire and come to help. "Master Takumi," she said urgently, seeing him frantically pulling texts from shelves. "We must save what we can. Tell me which ones to take." She expected him to be decisive, to have a plan, to direct her to the most important texts. But instead, he stopped moving. He stood there in the midst of the towering shelves, a manuscript in each hand, and simply stared at her. And in that moment, something shifted within him. He saw the absurdity of what he was trying to do. He could spend the few hours remaining choosing and carrying texts, making impossible decisions about what deserved to be saved. He could exhaust himself in a futile attempt to preserve what was already lost. Or he could acknowledge the truth that he had spent his entire life resisting, that nothing lasts forever, that all things, books, buildings, bodies, civilizations are temporary, that the purpose of preservation is not to make things eternal, but to honor them while they exist. Slowly, carefully, he set down the manuscripts he was holding. He turned to May, and his face was calm, almost peaceful. "Let them burn," he said softly. May stared at him in shock, unable to believe what she had just heard. "But Master, this is your life's work. These texts are irreplaceable. We cannot just let them be destroyed." Takumi nodded, acknowledging the truth of her words. "They are irreplaceable," he agreed, "and they will be destroyed. And there is nothing we can do to prevent that." "But Master, if we save even a few of the most important texts, it would be worth it." Takumi shook his head gently. "And who decides which texts are most important? Which voices from the past deserve to be preserved and which can be lost? The ancient sutras, the scientific treatises, the poetry, the personal letters. Each one is precious to someone. Each one contains knowledge or beauty or truth that matters. How can I choose? How can I say that this voice deserves to continue and that one does not?" May was weeping now, tears streaming down her face. "Then we should at least try. We should save what we can, even if we cannot save everything." Takumi placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "My dear student, I have spent 70 years in this library. I have devoted my entire life to preserving these texts, to ensuring that knowledge survives across generations. I believed that preservation was the highest calling, that protecting the past was the greatest service I could offer. But now, watching the flames approach, I realized something I should have understood long ago. Knowledge is not held in pages. It is held in minds and hearts. These texts are vessels, containers for wisdom, but they are not the wisdom itself. The wisdom lives in every person who has read these words, every conversation they have inspired, every life they have touched. You have studied here for a year. The knowledge you have gained does not live in these books anymore. It lives in you. And you will carry it forward and share it with others. And in that way, the library's purpose will continue. The library was never the books. It was the illumination they brought to those who sought them. And that light has been passed on thousands of times to thousands of people over 1,000 years. The fire will consume the physical texts, but it cannot consume what they have already given to the world. May listened through her tears, beginning to understand, but still the loss felt unbearable. So we should just stand here and watch it all burn? Do nothing? Takumi looked around at the towering shelves, at the accumulated treasure of centuries. "We bear witness," he said quietly, We honor what has been, and we let it go. And so they did. They walked out of the library together, leaving the doors open behind them. They joined the crowd of people fleeing the fire, but they stopped at a safe distance and turned to watch. The flames reached the library within an hour. They caught first on the wooden additions, the dry timber igniting almost instantly. The fire roared as it consumed structure after structure, hall after hall. Soon the stone buildings were engulfed as well, their wooden interiors and shelves providing fuel. Through the windows, Takumi could see the orange glow, could imagine the texts curling and blackening, centuries of careful copying reduced to ash in moments. The irreplaceable manuscripts, the unique texts, the voices from the past, all dissolving into smoke. And as he stood there, he felt no despair. He felt instead a strange and profound peace. For 70 years he had been holding on, gripping tightly, trying to control the uncontrollable. He had believed that his worth was measured by his success in preserving, in keeping things as they were. But now, released from that impossible burden, he felt lighter than he had in decades. He realized that he had been afraid of loss, afraid of failure, afraid of the inevitable passage of time. And in that fear he had missed something essential, that the purpose of the library was never to last forever. It was to serve its time, to pass forward what it could, and then to let go. Just as the texts themselves were copies of earlier texts, which were copies of earlier texts still. Knowledge had always moved through time, not by being preserved perfectly, but by being shared, adapted, and transmitted. Some texts survived, others were lost, but the essential wisdom kept flowing, like a river that changes course over centuries, carving new channels, leaving old ones dry. The water continues even if the path changes, and he had been so focused on maintaining one particular channel that he had forgotten about the water itself. Beside him, May wept quietly as the flames consumed the building, but Takumi placed a hand on her shoulder and spoke gently. "Do you remember the first text you studied?" "Here?" he asked. She nodded, wiping her eyes. It was a collection of poems from the Tang dynasty. I loved them so much I memorized several. "Then those poems still exist," Takumi said. "They live in your memory, and they will live in the memories of anyone you share them with." The library accomplished its purpose. It transmitted knowledge from the past to you, and now you will transmit it forward. The form changes, but the essence continues. They stood together through the night, watching the fire burn. Other scholars and students joined them, people who had spent time in the library, who had been nourished by its treasures. And as they stood there, they began to share with each other. One person recited a poem they had memorized. Another recounted a historical fact they had learned. A third spoke about a philosophical insight that had changed their understanding of life. And Takumi realized that this was the library's true legacy. Not the physical texts, but the countless moments of illumination they had sparked. Not the preservation of the past, but the enrichment of the present and future. By dawn, the fire had burned itself out, leaving only smoldering ruins. Where the great library had stood for 1,000 years, there was now only ash and charred stone. But as the first light touched the ruins, Takumi turned to the gathered crowd and spoke. "Now," he said, "we begin again. Not by rebuilding what was, but by carrying what we learned into what comes next. We have all been changed by our time in the library, by the knowledge and wisdom we encountered there. Now we must live that wisdom, share it, pass it forward in whatever ways we can. We must become living libraries, each of us a keeper of what we have learned. And in that way, the Great Library will continue, not as a building, but as a living tradition. One by one, the people began to nod, understanding settling over them. The loss was still painful, but it was no longer purely tragic. It was transformation, the end of one form and the beginning of many others. The crowd slowly dispersed, each person returning to their lives, carrying with them what they had received from the library. And Takumi stood alone before the ruins, his life's work reduced to ash. But he did not feel like a failure. He felt instead a curious sense of completion. The work was finished, not because it had been preserved forever, but because it had been fully given. And that giving was enough. It had always been enough. He turned away from the ruins and began walking toward the city center. He did not know what he would do next, where he would go, how he would spend his remaining years. But for the first time in his life, that uncertainty felt like freedom rather than fear. He had spent 70 years trying to hold on to the past. Now he could finally live in the present, open to whatever came next. And as he walked through the morning light, he found himself smiling. The library was gone, but the light it had kindled still burned. In him, in May, in thousands of others who had passed through its halls. That light would continue to shine, would continue to illuminate, would continue to pass forward. Not perfectly, not completely, but genuinely. And that was the only immortality that mattered. Breathe deeply now, letting this story settle into the depths of your being. Feel the weight of it, the truth of it, the liberation it offers. Takumi's surrender was not defeat, it was wisdom. It was the recognition that comes when we finally stop struggling against the nature of reality itself. Everything we love, everything we build, everything we pour ourselves into will one day be gone. This is not a tragedy. It is simply the nature of existence. Nothing in the phenomenal world is permanent. The flower blooms in all its glory, then withers and returns to the earth. The mountain stands solid for eons, then erodes grain by grain into the sea. The wave rises high above the ocean's surface, then merges back into the whole. The breath enters the body, sustains life for a moment, then departs. And we humans spend so much energy trying to resist this fundamental truth. We cling to our youth, mourning every sign of aging. We grasp at relationships, fearing the day they might end. We accumulate possessions, trying to build something permanent in an impermanent world. We create monuments, legacies, institutions, hoping that something of us will last forever. And there is nothing wrong with building, with creating, with preserving. The library served a beautiful purpose for 1,000 years. It passed forward immeasurable wisdom, touched countless lives, enriched generations. But its purpose was not to last forever. It was to give what it had while it existed. And that purpose was fulfilled completely, regardless of how the library met its end. Takumi had believed that his value lay in successful preservation, in keeping things from changing. But preservation is a temporary measure at best. All things will eventually be lost, if not now, then later. If not to fire, then to time. The real question is not whether things will last, but whether they have truly been given, whether they have served their purpose while they existed, whether they have passed forward what they had to offer. And in that sense, the library was a complete success. It gave generously for 1,000 years, and when its time came to end, it ended. Neither too soon nor too late, but exactly when the conditions arose for it to end. This is the teaching of impermanence, not a pessimistic resignation, but a liberating acceptance. When we truly understand that nothing lasts forever, two things happen. First, we can finally stop clutching so tightly to what we have. We can hold things lightly, appreciating them while they're here without demanding they stay forever. We can love without the fear that love must be permanent to have value. We can create without the anxiety that our creations must endure to be worthwhile. We can live fully in each moment, knowing that this moment is already complete in itself. Second, we become free to focus on what actually matters. Not preservation, but presence. Not holding on to the past, but being fully alive right now. Not creating something that will last forever, but giving fully to this moment. The library's greatest contribution was not the texts it preserved, but the illumination it offered to each person who entered. In the same way, your greatest contribution is not what you leave behind, but what you give while you're here. The love you offer in this moment, not the monument you build for the future. The presence you bring to each interaction, not the legacy you craft for posterity. The authentic expression of your unique being, not the carefully curated image you hope will outlast you. What are you holding on to that is ready to be released? What are you clutching tightly, afraid of what will happen when it's gone? What are you exhausting yourself trying to preserve, maintain, keep from changing? And what might become available to you if you could finally let go, not abandoning what you love, but loving it without demanding it be eternal? Not giving up on what matters, but engaging with it more fully, more presently, because you recognize its temporary nature, not becoming passive or resigned, but becoming more alive, more awake, because you understand that this moment is all you ever really have. These questions are not meant to create anxiety or urgency. They are gentle invitations to examine where you might be creating unnecessary suffering for yourself. Because the suffering comes not from loss itself. Loss is inevitable, built into the fabric of existence. The suffering comes from our resistance to loss, our insistence that things should be other than they are. When we can finally accept that everything changes, everything ends, everything is temporary, a great burden lifts. We are no longer trying to hold back the tide, stop the seasons from turning, freeze time in place. We can simply be here, now, appreciating what is without demanding that it last forever. And paradoxically, this acceptance allows us to appreciate things more deeply, not less. When you know the flower will fade, you look at it more carefully. When you know the sunset will end, you savor its colors more fully. When you know this conversation will conclude, you listen more attentively. When you know this breath might be your last, you take it with full awareness. Impermanence does not diminish value. It reveals value, intensifies it, makes it precious. So breathe now and feel the preciousness of this moment that will never come again, that exists only now, that is already complete, You do not need to hold on to it. You only need to be fully present with it. And then let it go, making space for the next moment and the next, and the next. Like Takumi watching the library burn, releasing it with each exhalation, not because he didn't care, but because he cared enough to honor its nature, to let it complete its purpose and transform into something new, to trust that what mattered most, the light, the wisdom, the illumination, would continue in other forms. This is the teaching of the burning library. This is the wisdom of accepting impermanence. This is the freedom that comes from finally releasing our grip on what we cannot hold anyway. And in this release, we discover that we have lost nothing essential, because the essential, love, awareness, presence, being, cannot be burned, cannot be destroyed, cannot be lost. It changes form, yes. It moves through different manifestation, yes. But it continues always in ways we cannot fully track or control. And that is not just acceptable, it is beautiful, it is perfect. It is the way things have always been and will always be. So rest in that now. Rest in the acceptance that all things are temporary, including you, including this moment. And in that acceptance find not despair but peace, not resignation but engagement, not numbness but heightened aliveness, because when you know that nothing lasts forever, you can finally be fully here now, not worried about the future, not clinging to the past, but present, awake, alive. This is enough. This moment is enough. You are enough. Everything is enough. Just as it is, just as it has been, just as it will be. Complete, whole, perfect in its imperfection, eternal in its temporariness, infinite in its finitude. Breathe and know this truth. Let it sink into your bones, your cells, your very being. Nothing needs to last forever to have value. You do not need to last forever to have value. Your value is in your being, not in your duration. In your presence, not in your permanence. In your participation in this vast dance of life. However briefly you're here, so dance now, with all that you are. Give fully, love completely, be present utterly. And when the time comes to let go, let go. Not with regret, but with gratitude. Not with fear, but with trust. Not with grasping, but with openness to whatever comes next. This is the way of wisdom. This is the path of peace. This is the freedom that Takumi found in the ashes of everything he had built. And it is available to you, right now, in this very moment. So, if these teachings have brought you even a small measure of peace tonight, know that this space is here for you whenever you need to return. This path is always open, these truths always available, this stillness always waiting. You may come back to rest here as often as you wish, simply by closing your eyes, taking a breath, and remembering that peace is not far away, not difficult to find, not dependent on special circumstances. It is here in this moment, in the space between thoughts, in the stillness beneath all movement. And if you would like to walk this path again, you are welcome to subscribe and return whenever you seek rest, whenever you need to remember, whenever you wish to come home to yourself. But there is no urgency, no pressure, no expectation. The teachings will remain patient and unchanging, like mountains in the distance, like stars in the night sky. They do not demand anything from you, they simply offer what they have always offered. Refuge from the storm of doing, from the exhaustion of constant striving. Stillness in the midst of chaos, peace in the midst of struggle. A place to lay down the weight of the world and remember what you truly are beneath all the roles and identities and responsibilities. Not the person who must achieve, accomplish, succeed, prove their worth, but the awareness that witnesses all experience with equanimity, that holds all emotion with compassion, that embraces all of life with acceptance. So rest now in this knowing, rest deeply, completely, without reservation. You are held here, supported here, welcomed here exactly as you are. You do not need to be different, better, more evolved, more enlightened. You only need to be here, breathing, present, alive. And that is enough. It has always been enough. It will always be enough. The teachings we have explored tonight, the falling petal, the blind calligrapher, the temple cat, the burning library, are all pointing to the same essential truth. Stop struggling. Stop forcing. Stop holding on so tightly. Release your grip on how things should be and meet things as they are. Surrender your need to control, to understand, to make everything happen through willpower alone. Trust the intelligence that moves through all things, the wisdom that guides rivers to the sea, that turns seeds into trees, that knows how to breathe your body without your conscious intervention. This intelligence is not separate from you. It is you at the deepest level. You are not a separate self struggling against an indifferent universe. You are an expression of the universe itself, localized in this particular body for a time, but never truly separate from the whole. And when you recognize this, not just intellectually, but experientially, viscerally, everything changes. The burden of being a separate self, responsible for everything, falls away. The anxiety about the future, the regret about the past, loosens its grip. The constant commentary of the mind, the endless judging and comparing and evaluating quiets down. And what remains is simple presence. Being here, being now, being this. Not as a task to accomplish, but as what you already are, what you have always been, what you could never not be. This is your true nature, your essential being, your deepest identity. Not the stories you tell about yourself, not the roles you play, not the thoughts that arise and pass, but the awareness in which all of that appears. The screen on which the movie of your life is projected, the space in which all experience unfolds. This awareness is not personal. It is universal. It is the same awareness that looks out from every pair of eyes, that animates every living being, that is the very ground of existence itself. And recognizing this is not a special achievement. It is simply waking up to what has always been true. Like opening your eyes after a dream and realizing that the dream world was never separate from you. It was all happening in your own consciousness, made of your own awareness, never truly apart from you at all. In the same way, this entire world, with all its complexity, all its beauty, all its suffering, is arising in consciousness. And you are that consciousness, not as a limited individual, but as the infinite awareness in which everything appears. This recognition brings with it a profound peace. Not because your problems disappear or your life becomes perfect, but because you realize that you are not fundamentally threatened by anything that happens in the phenomenal world. Thoughts arise and pass. You remain. Emotions surge and subside. You remain. The body ages and changes, you remain. Circumstances shift and transform, you remain. Even death cannot touch what you truly are, because what you truly are has never been born and will never die. It is the eternal presence that has always been here, that will always be here, that is here now. And resting in this recognition, even for a moment, brings a peace that surpasses all understanding. Not a peace that depends on everything going your way, but a peace that underlies all experience, regardless of whether it is pleasant or unpleasant, desired or feared. A peace that is not the absence of difficulty, but the presence of acceptance. A peace that does not require perfection, but embraces imperfection as part of the whole. A peace that is not fragile and conditional, but stable and unconditional. This is what the teachings point toward. This is what the stories illuminate. This is what is available to you in this very moment, if you are willing to simply stop and notice. Not to achieve it, not to create it, not to earn it, but to recognize it, to remember it, to return to it. Again and again, moment by moment, breath by breath, because the mind will pull you away into thoughts, into stories, into worries about the future or regrets about the past. This is what minds do. It is not a problem, not a failure, but each time you notice that you have been pulled away, you can gently return to the breath, to the body, to the simple fact of being alive right now. Return to the awareness that holds all experience. Return to the peace that has been here all along, patiently waiting for you to notice it. This returning is the practice, not a one-time achievement, but an ongoing orientation, a continuous remembering. And each time you return, it becomes easier, more natural, more familiar, until eventually the returning itself falls away and you simply are what you have always been. Not someone who is practicing being present, but presence itself. Not someone who is trying to be peaceful, but peace itself. Not someone who is seeking enlightenment, but the awareness in which seeking and finding both appear. This is the ultimate teaching, the final letting go. Even the practice must be released, even the path must be abandoned, even the teachings must be transcended, because in the end, there is no path to where you already are. There is no technique for becoming what you have never not been. There is only the recognition, the remembering, the return to what is always and already here. So rest now in that recognition. Let all seeking fall away. Let all striving dissolve. Let all the doing, all the trying, all the efforting simply cease. And in that cessation, discover what remains. The peace that has always been here, the stillness that has always been here, the love that has always been here, the awareness that has always been here, you in your truest, deepest, most essential nature, not the small self with its fears and desires and endless concerns, but the vast self that is identical with all existence, that contains all things, that is the very ground of being itself. This is who you are, this is what you are, this is where you are, right here, right now, exactly as you are. Nothing to change, nothing to fix, nothing to improve. Only this, being, awareness, presence, peace, infinite, eternal, unchanging, and always already complete. Rest in this, rest as this, rest. 7. The dissolving self. The thoughts that rise within you are not you. They are like clouds crossing the vast sky of awareness. Some are dark and heavy, threatening storms. Some are light and wispy, barely visible against the blue. But none of them are the sky itself. The sky does not change when clouds appear. It does not become cloudy, does not become dark. It remains what it has always been, open, spacious, clear. The clouds pass through, but the sky is untouched. In the same way, thoughts pass through your awareness. They arise, they linger for a time, and then they fade. And your awareness remains unchanged, unaffected, eternally present. You are not the thought, I am anxious. You are the awareness that notices anxiety arising. You are not the thought, I am not good enough. You are the awareness that observes that belief appearing in consciousness. You are not the thought, I need to figure this out. You are the awareness in which the impulse to figure things out appears and dissolves. This distinction is not philosophical, it is experiential. You can notice it right now if you simply pay attention. Notice that thoughts are arising, perhaps thoughts about these words, thoughts about your day, thoughts about tomorrow. And notice that there is something that is aware of these thoughts, something that is watching them, witnessing them, registering them. That something is you, not the thoughts themselves, but the awareness of thoughts. And this awareness has a very different quality than the thoughts. Thoughts are changeable, temporary, constantly in motion. But awareness is stable, continuous, always present. Thoughts are often negative, critical, worrying. But awareness is neutral, open, accepting. Thoughts create suffering when we believe them, when we identify with them, when we mistake them for truth. But awareness itself never suffers. It simply witnesses whatever arises without judgment or resistance. This is the great discovery of meditation, of contemplative practice, of turning attention inward. That you are not your thoughts, you are not your emotions, you are not your body, you are not your personality, your history, your roles, your identities. You are the awareness in which all of that appears. And this awareness is vast beyond measure, peaceful beyond description, free beyond imagination. It cannot be harmed by anything that happens in the realm of form. It cannot be diminished by failure or enlarged by success. It cannot be made impure by wrong action or made pure by right action. It simply is what it is, aware, present, unchanging. This is sometimes called your true nature, your Buddha nature, your essence. Different traditions use different words, but they are all pointing to the same reality. The reality that beneath all the surface movement of thoughts and emotions and sensations, there is a profound stillness. And that stillness is not empty or void, it is full of presence, full of aliveness, full of being. It is what you are when you strip away everything that you are not. Like the sculptor who sees the statue within the block of marble and simply removes everything that is not the statue. You remove the identification with thoughts, not the statue. You remove the identification with emotions, not the statue. You remove the identification with body, not the statue. You remove the identification with roles and labels, not the statue. And what remains is the statue that was there all along. Your true self, your essential nature, your deepest identity, not something you need to become, but something you need to uncover. Not something you need to create, but something you need to recognize. Not something you need to achieve, but something you need to remember. And the remembering happens through a simple practice, the practice of observing without identifying, of noticing what arises without claiming it as me or mine, of being aware of experience without becoming lost in experience. This is the practice we can engage right now, together in this moment. Notice the sensation of your body resting, the weight, the temperature, the points of contact with the surface beneath you. Notice these sensations, but do not identify as them. You are not the body, you are the awareness that knows the body. The body is an object of awareness, not the subject that is aware. Now notice any sounds in your environment, perhaps distant traffic, perhaps the sound of your own breathing, perhaps silence itself. Notice these sounds, but do not identify as them. You are not the sounds. You are the awareness that hears sounds. Sound is an object of awareness, not the subject that is aware. Now notice any thoughts that are present. Perhaps thoughts about these instructions, perhaps thoughts about your life, perhaps seemingly random thoughts. Notice these thoughts, but do not identify as them. You are not the thoughts, you are the awareness that witnesses thoughts. Thoughts are objects of awareness, not the subject that is aware. Now notice any emotions that are present. Perhaps peace, perhaps restlessness, perhaps boredom, perhaps curiosity. Notice these emotions, but do not identify as them. You are not the emotions, you are the awareness that feels emotions. Emotions are objects of awareness, not the subject that is aware. And now notice the awareness itself, not as an object, but as the subject, the one who is noticing everything else. Can you find this awareness? Can you locate it anywhere? Does it have a center, an edge, a boundary? Or is it more like space itself, everywhere and nowhere, present but ungraspable? This is what you truly are, not any particular thing that can be seen or known, but the seeing itself, the knowing itself. Not an object among other objects, but the subject that is aware of all objects. Not a thing, but the space in which all things appear. Not a self, but the awareness in which the sense of self arises. And this awareness is not personal to you, it is universal, shared by all beings. The awareness looking out through your eyes is the same awareness looking out through every other pair of eyes. The presence that animates your body is the same presence that animates all bodies. The consciousness that witnesses your experience is the same consciousness that witnesses all experience. We are not separate selves struggling alone in an indifferent universe. We are the universe itself, localized in billions of different forms, each one a unique expression of the same underlying reality. Like waves on the ocean, each wave appears separate, has its own shape and size and movement. But every wave is made of the same water, part of the same ocean, never truly separate at all. And when the wave recognizes this, when it realizes it is not just a wave, but the entire ocean temporarily taking wave form, everything changes. The fear of death disappears because the wave realizes it cannot die, it can only return to being ocean, which it has always been anyway. The fear of not being good enough disappears because there is no standard to measure up to. The ocean is perfect as it is, and every wave is a perfect expression of the ocean. The sense of loneliness disappears, because how can the ocean be alone? It is everything, everywhere, always connected to itself. This is the profound shift that happens when we stop identifying as the small self and recognize ourselves as awareness itself, not as a belief or a philosophy, but as a direct, lived experience. And this experience brings with it a peace and freedom that cannot be taken away, because it is not dependent on circumstances, not contingent on anything in the phenomenal world. It is the recognition of what you have always been, what you are right now, what you will always be. Before you were born, this awareness was here. After you die, this awareness will remain. It is the eternal backdrop against which the temporary play of life unfolds. And you are that backdrop, not the play. The play includes your thoughts, your emotions, your body, your life story. But you are the awareness in which the entire play appears, the screen on which the movie is projected, and the screen is never harmed by anything that happens in the movie. No matter how intense the drama, how violent the action, how tragic the plot, the screen remains pristine, untouched, at peace. In the same way, no matter what happens in your life, awareness remains untouched. It witnesses all experience with perfect equanimity, never grasping at pleasure or pushing away pain, because it knows that all experience is temporary, all phenomena arise and pass, and it alone endures. This is the teaching that the ancient sages pointed toward with phrases like, "Be still and know," or "The kingdom of heaven is within," or "Thou art that." They were all saying the same thing in different languages, different metaphors, different cultural contexts. Stop looking outside yourself for what you seek. Stop trying to become something other than what you are. Stop identifying with the temporary and recognize the eternal. You are not the wave. You are the ocean. You are not the thought. You are the awareness. You are not the self. You are the space in which the self appears. And in this recognition, you find the peace you have been seeking your entire life. Not by adding anything, not by becoming anything, not by achieving anything, but by subtracting, by releasing, by letting go of everything you are not, until only what you truly are remains. Vast, open, aware, present, peaceful, free. This is your inheritance, your birthright, your true home. And it is here right now, in this very moment, closer to you than your own breath. You do not need to travel anywhere to find it. You do not need to do anything special to access it. You only need to stop, to be still, to notice what is already and always here. The awareness that is reading these words, the presence that is breathing this body, the consciousness that is experiencing this moment. That is you, in your deepest, truest, most essential nature. And that is what you can rest in now, as these words slowly fade into silence. Not as a concept to understand, but as a reality to inhabit. Not as something to believe, but as something to be. Simply this, aware, present, still, beyond thought, beyond emotion, beyond identification, pure consciousness, pure awareness, pure being, infinite, eternal, unchanging, home.
Ice-T.
this path together through the deep hours of the night. We have explored ancient teachings through stories of petals and fine calligraphers. We have contemplated wisdom through tales of temple cats and burning libraries. We have turned attention inward to discover the awareness that underlies all experience. And through it all, one teaching has emerged again and again, like a refrain in a song. The teaching of letting go, of surrendering, of releasing our grip on what we cannot control anyway. The teaching that peace is not something to be achieved, but something to be revealed. By removing the layers of tension, resistance, and striving that obscure it. By recognizing that we are not the waves of thought and emotion, but the ocean of awareness in which they appear. And so, as we approach the end of this journey together, let us rest in that peace. Let us allow the words to fade, the concepts to dissolve, the teachings to settle into the wordless depth from which they came. Let us return to the simple, sacred practice of being present with the breath. Breathing in, breathing out, in rhythm with the ancient dance of life itself. Each breath a small miracle, the outside world becoming part of the inside world. Oxygen molecules traveling through airways and alveoli to nourish every cell. And then the used breath being released. Carbon dioxide returning to the air to nourish plants that will create more oxygen. This exchange has been happening every moment of your life, without your conscious involvement. Trillions of breaths, each one sustaining life, each one part of the vast web of interdependence that connects all living beings. You are breathing the same air that was breathed by your ancestors, by saints and sages, by every human who has ever lived. You are part of an unbroken chain of breathing that stretches back to the first creatures that crawled from the sea. And with each breath, you are participating in the great respiration of the planet itself, the in-breath of forests and oceans, the out-breath of cities and fires, the give and take, the exchange and balance, the endless cycling of elements through different forms. This is not poetry. This is reality, the actual physical truth of your existence. You are not separate from nature, not isolated from the world, not independent from other beings. You are woven into the fabric of life at every level, from the subatomic to the cosmic. The iron in your blood was forged in the heart of an ancient star. The water in your cells has flowed through countless other beings before reaching you. The energy that powers your thoughts came originally from the sun, transformed through plants and food into the electricity of neural firing. You are made entirely of the universe, assembled temporarily into this particular configuration called a human being. And one day, this configuration will dissolve, and the elements that compose you will be returned to the earth, to become part of other forms, other beings, other expressions of the same underlying energy. This is not death. It is transformation, recycling, continuation in a different form, like water changing from ice to liquid to vapor and back again. Always water, just taking different shapes. And what you truly are, the awareness, the consciousness, the presence, was never born and will never die. It existed before this body appeared, and it will continue after this body dissolves. Because it is not a property of the body, but the ground of all existence, the space in which all forms appear and disappear. So there is nothing to fear, nothing to hold on to,
nothing to protect or defend. You are already part of something infinite and eternal. You always have been, and you always will be. The small self, with all its worries and desires and concerns, is just a temporary ripple on the surface of vast waters, and you can choose to identify as the ripple and experience the anxiety and instability that comes with that identification. Or you can recognize yourself as the water and experience the peace and continuity that comes with that recognition. Both are true, in a sense. You are both the form and the formless, both the wave and the ocean. But one identification leads to suffering, and the other leads to freedom. One makes you feel small, limited, vulnerable, alone. The other makes you feel vast, unlimited, invulnerable, intimately connected to everything. So choose freedom if you are ready for it. Choose to rest as awareness rather than as thought. Choose to identify as presence rather than as personality. Choose to be the ocean rather than the wave, not by forcing anything, not by rejecting the wave aspect of yourself, but simply by expanding your sense of identity to include the totality rather than just the part. Like zooming out from a tight focus on one pixel to see the entire image. The pixel is still there, still part of the picture, but you are no longer limited to that one perspective. You can see the whole, and from that vantage point, everything makes more sense. The suffering that seems so overwhelming from the pixel's perspective is revealed as one small element in a vast and beautiful design. The problems that seem so insurmountable are seen as temporary challenges, part of the natural unfolding of life. The fear that seems so paralyzing is recognized as a misunderstanding, a case of mistaken identity, a forgetting of what you truly are. And in this recognition, fear loses its power, not because you become fearless in the sense of never feeling fear. The emotion may still arise, but because you no longer believe that you are the fear, no longer identify with it, no longer let it dictate your actions. You recognize it as a passing weather pattern in the vast sky of awareness. Clouds of fear drifting across, perhaps darkening the sky for a time, perhaps bringing rain or thunder. But the sky is not harmed by the storm, not diminished by the clouds. It remains spacious, clear, infinite, unaffected by whatever passes through it. This is the ultimate freedom, not freedom from experience, but freedom in experience. Not the absence of difficulty, but the presence of equanimity in the midst of difficulty. Not a life without storms, but an unshakable stability that remains regardless of the weather. And this freedom is not something you need to earn or achieve or become worthy of. It is your natural state, always available, always here, simply waiting for you to recognize it. Like a clear blue sky that has been hidden by clouds. When the clouds part, the sky is revealed, but it was there all along. In the same way, peace is here all along. Beneath the clouds of thought and emotion and identification. You do not need to create it or cultivate it or journey somewhere to find it. You only need to recognize it, to notice it, to rest in it. And the way to do that is to stop. Just stop. Stop trying to figure everything out, stop trying to fix everything. Stop trying to become something other than what you are. Stop the endless doing and allow yourself to simply be. Be here in this moment without agenda or goal or expectation. Be present with whatever is happening, the breath, the sensations, the sounds, the silence. Be aware of experience without grasping at pleasant experiences or pushing away unpleasant ones. Just be simple, direct, uncomplicated being. And in that being, you will find what you have been seeking your entire life. Not in some dramatic moment of revelation, but in the quiet recognition that you have always been home, that there is nowhere to go because you are already here, that there is nothing to become because you are already complete, that there is nothing to achieve because you are already enough. This moment, exactly as it is the fulfillment of all seeking, not because it is perfect or pleasant or special in any way, but because it is real, it is here, it is now. And reality, raw, unfiltered, direct experience of what is infinitely richer than any fantasy about what should be. The stories we tell ourselves about how things should be different keep us trapped in dissatisfaction, but direct experience of how things actually are sets us free, because what is already perfect, not in the sense that it cannot be improved, but in the sense that it is complete in itself. This moment is not a stepping stone to some future moment. It is not a problem to be solved or an obstacle to be overcome. It is the fullness of life itself appearing in this particular form, inviting you to meet it fully. And when you do meet it fully, when you stop resisting and start accepting, stop judging and start seeing, stop thinking and start experiencing, a miracle occurs. The miracle of presence, of aliveness, of intimate contact with reality as it is. And this intimacy reveals the truth that has always been there beneath the surface noise, that everything is connected, everything is sacred, everything is alive with the same presence that animates you. The wall is not just a wall, it is atoms vibrating in mostly empty space, held together by invisible forces, part of the same quantum field that composes your body. The sound is not just a sound, it is a wave of pressure moving through air, creating patterns that your brain interprets, arising from and returning to silence. The thought is not just a thought, it is a neural firing pattern, an electrochemical event, a fleeting configuration of energy in the vast space of consciousness. Everything is process, not thing. Everything is verb, not noun. Everything is flowing, changing, transforming, never fixed or solid or separate. And you are part of this flow, this dance, this eternal unfolding, not watching it from outside, but participating in it fully, embedded in it completely, inseparable from it. This is the truth that sets you free, not free from life, but free in life. Not free from challenges, but free in how you meet challenges. Not free from pain, but free in how you relate to pain. Not free from change, but free in your ability to flow with change rather than resist it. This is the peace that surpasses understanding, not because it is mystical or otherworldly, but because it is so simple that the complex mind cannot grasp it. The mind wants to analyze, to explain, to make peace into something that can be achieved through effort. But peace is not a product of effort. It is what remains when effort ceases. It is not something you do. It is what you are when you stop doing. It is not something you think. It is what is here when thinking stops. So let the thinking stop now. Let the doing stop now. Let the striving, the seeking, the trying, Let it all stop now. And in that stopping, notice what is here, simply now, simply this. Breath moving in and out, heart beating its steady rhythm, body resting in gravity's embrace, awareness witnessing it all with compassion, with acceptance, with love. This is enough. This has always been enough. This will always be enough. You are enough. You are home. You are peace itself. Rest now in that knowing. Let everything else dissolve into the background. Let all concerns fade into irrelevance. Let the entire weight of the world fall away and simply be here, now, present, aware, alive. This moment is all there is. This moment is all there has ever been. This moment is all there will ever be. And it is complete, perfect, whole. As are you, as has always been, as will always be. The words are fading now, retreating into the silence from which they emerged. The teachings are settling, sinking into the depth where understanding lives beyond concepts. And what remains is simply this, the quiet of the night, the rhythm of breath, the presence of awareness. You have traveled far tonight, through stories and reflections, through teachings and silence. But you have not traveled anywhere at all. You have simply been here, becoming more deeply aware of here. Like diving into an ocean, you do not go anywhere. You simply go deeper into where you already are. And in that depth, you have touched something essential, something true, something that cannot be put into words. The peace that exists prior to disturbance, the stillness that exists prior to movement, the awareness that exists prior to thought. This is your true home, and you can return here anytime you wish. Not by doing anything special, not by creating any particular condition, but simply by stopping, by being still, by noticing what is always and already here. The door is always open, the path is always available, the silence is always waiting, and so as these final words fade into that silence, let yourself rest completely. Let the body sink deeper into relaxation, every muscle releasing, every cell softening. Let the breath become slower, gentler, almost imperceptible. Let the mind quiet, thoughts spacing out like stars in the night sky. Let the heart open, no longer protecting, no longer defending. You are held here, supported here, loved here, not by anything external, but by the nature of reality itself. You are part of something vast and benevolent, something that has been caring for you since before you were born. The same intelligence that formed your body in the womb, that taught your heart to beat and your lungs to breathe. The sea, wisdom that guides birds in migration and flowers in blooming and planets in their orbits. This intelligence is not separate from you. It is you at the deepest level, and it knows exactly what to do, exactly how to care for you, exactly how to guide you home. So trust it now, surrender to it now, let it carry you now. Like a leaf floating on a stream, let yourself be carried by the current of life. No need to swim, no need to struggle, no need to try to control the direction. Just float, just rest, just allow. And as you float on this stream, drifting deeper into rest, deeper into peace, deeper into sleep, know this: all is well, all has always been well, all will always be well. The universe is unfolding exactly as it should, and you are an essential part of that unfolding. You are needed here, you are wanted here, you belong here, not because of what you do or achieve, but because of what you are, a unique expression of the infinite, a precious manifestation of the divine, a beloved child of the cosmos. And so, rest now, dear one. Rest deeply, rest fully, rest without reservation. Let sleep come gently like dusk settling over the land. Let consciousness fade softly like a candle burning down to the last flicker of flame. Let everything dissolve, the day, the self, the stories, the world, all dissolving into the vast expanse of being. And in that dissolution, find not loss but liberation, not ending but transformation, not death but return to source. The night is here to hold you. The darkness is here to comfort you. The silence is here to embrace you. And in this holding, this comforting, this embracing, you are completely safe. You have always been completely safe. You will always be completely safe, because you are not a separate fragment, vulnerable and alone. You are the whole, temporarily experiencing itself through this particular perspective, and the whole cannot be harmed, cannot be lost, cannot be diminished. It simply is, eternal and unchanging, the ground of all existence. And you are that, always have been, always will be. So rest now in that truth, rest as that truth, rest. The breath continues, slower now, softer, like gentle waves on a distant shore. The heartbeat continues, steady and faithful, the drum that has been beating since the beginning, and awareness continues, witnessing it all with infinite patience, infinite compassion, infinite love. There is nothing left to do, nothing left to say, nothing left to understand. Only this gentle descent into rest, into peace, into the arms of the infinite. Let go now of everything, every thought, every concern, every identity. Let it all fall away like autumn leaves drifting to the ground. And in that falling, discover that you are not falling at all. You are being held, always held, by the same hands that hold the stars in their courses. You are being carried, always carried, by the same current that moves the oceans. You are being loved, always loved, by the same love that breathes life into all things. This love is not sentimental or conditional. It is the very fabric of existence itself. It is what holds atoms together and galaxies apart. It is the force that draws all things toward unity, toward wholeness, toward home. And you are an expression of that love, a manifestation of that unity, a journey toward that home. The journey is long, spanning lifetimes, perhaps spanning eternities. But tonight, you can rest. You can lay down the burden of becoming and simply be. You can release the struggle to understand and simply know. You can let go of the effort to arrive and recognize that you are already here. Here where you have always been. Here where you will always be. here in the eternal now that is the only reality there is. So be here now, be here fully, completely, without reservation, and in this being find the fulfillment of all seeking, find the answer to all questions, find the end of all sorrow, not because circumstances have changed, but because you have remembered who you truly are, not a separate self struggling through a difficult world, but the awareness in which self and world both appear, not a wave fearing its dissolution into the ocean, but the ocean itself playing at being a wave for a little while. This is the truth that sets you free. This is the recognition that brings peace. This is the knowing that transcends all understanding. And it is here now, available to you in this very moment, not as something to grasp or achieve, but as something to rest in, to be, to allow. So allow it now. Allow the peace, allow the rest, allow the love. Allow yourself to be held, to be carried, to be cherished. Allow yourself to let go completely, trusting that you will not fall into emptiness, but into fullness. Not into nothing, but into everything. Not into death, but into life. Eternal, infinite, abundant life that knows no beginning and no end. This is what awaits you as you drift into sleep. This is what holds you as consciousness fades. This is what you will remember when you wake, if you choose to remember, that you are not what you thought you were. You are so much more, vast beyond measure, deep beyond fathoming, precious beyond words. And you are loved, infinitely and eternally loved, by the very source of existence itself. Rest in that love now. Let it fill you, surround you, become you. There is nothing else needed, nothing else required, nothing else desired. Only this, love, awareness, presence, being. Only this, now, here, always, home. Rest, rest deeply, rest completely, rest forever in the arms of the infinite. All is well, all has always been well. All will always be well. The night holds you gently. The darkness cradles you softly, and the silence sings you to sleep with a lullaby older than stars. Sleep now, dear friend. Sleep peacefully. Sleep deeply. Sleep well. And may you wake refreshed, renewed, and deeply rested, knowing that peace is always here, knowing that you are always home, knowing that you are always, always loved. Good night.